What happens when a man is judged by his color, not his character? At JFK Airport. Matthew Thorne, a black CEO in a simple knit polo, is denied his paid-for first-class seat 1A by a dismissive gate agent. He's humiliated, threatened with security, and forced into a cramped premium economy seat. The agent, Carolyn Hayes, smirks as she gives his seat to a loud, entitled passenger. She made a terrible mistake. She didn't know who Matthew Thorne was. She didn't know that 30 minutes later, her single act of prejudice would trigger a system-wide failure grounding every single plane in the entire airline across the globe. This isn't just a story about revenge. It's about the catastrophic cost of karma. The air in John F. Kennedy International Airport's Terminal 4 was thick with the usual Tuesday morning chaos. It was a symphony of rolling luggage, anxious final calls, and the synthetic cherry almond scent of cleaning solution, failing to mask the odor of jet fuel and stress. Matthew Thorne, however, was an island of calm in this river of panic. He stood at an easy at-ease, observing the controlled frenzy at Gate B23, where Transatlantic Air TAA Flight 108 to London Heathrow was beginning its pre-boarding process. Matthew was not a man who broadcasted his status. Today he was the embodiment of stealth wealth. His attire was a simple, impeccably tailored navy blue knit polo made of a silk cashmere blend that probably cost more than the gate agent's monthly mortgage payment. His chinos were a soft, sand-colored Japanese twill, and his feet were clad in unbranded, hand-stitched Loro Piana driving moccasins. A simple, elegant Patek Philippe Calatrava was visible on his wrist, but only if one knew what to look for. To the undiscerning eye, he was just a well-dressed man. To the prejudiced eye, he was something else entirely. He was Matthew Thorne, founder and CEO of Astria Solutions, a company whose complex logistics and safety compliance software was the invisible beating heart of nearly 60% of the world's aviation industry. If a plane was in the air, chances are Astria software was monitoring its engine wear, its load balance, and its maintenance schedule. Matthew was flying to London to finalize a landmark deal with the British Airport Authority, a deal that would make his company the mandatory standard for all UK carriers. He was flying TAA not out of loyalty but for convenience. Their 900 AM departure was perfect. He'd paid for seat 1A, the coveted bulkhead suite in first class, with his personal unbranded credit card. He valued the privacy to work and sleep. The call was made for first-class passengers. Matthew approached the podium phone in hand, his digital boarding pass gleaming. The woman at the desk, whose name tag read Carolyn Hayes, barely looked at him. She was in her late 40s with a severe blonde bob and a palpable aura of someone who wielded her tiny scrap of authority like a weapon. She was typing furiously, her face tight with stress. "Boarding pass," she snapped, not making eye contact. Matthew presented his phone. She scanned it. A sharp beep sounded, followed by a dull thud sound from her terminal. Her eyes narrowed. "There's a problem," she said, her voice dripping with accusation, as if he had personally caused it. "Oh," Matthew replied, his voice a smooth, calm baritone. "My confirmation came through this morning." Carolyn tapped her keyboard with vindictive force. "The system says your seat was released. There was a manifest error." She avoided his eyes, focusing instead on her screen, as if it held the secrets of the universe. "Released?" Matthew kept his tone even, but a cold knot began to form in his stomach. He'd felt this sensation before. It was the familiar, unwelcome chill of being handled. My ticket is fully paid and confirmed. Seat 1A. I'm not sure I understand what released means. It means the seat isn't available, she said, finally looking up. Her eyes swept over him from his polo to his shoes, and a tiny, almost imperceptible smirk touched her lips. It was a look of confirmation. He was the error. We've had to reseat you. We have a very nice seat for you in Premium Economy 14B. Carolyn, Matthew said, using her name deliberately. I booked first class. I paid for 1A. I am not interested in 14B. Could you please check again? Perhaps there's a simple mistake. Sir, she said, her voice rising. We are in the middle of boarding. I don't have time to check again. The flight is oversold. This is your new seat. You can either take it, or I can rebook you on the 8:00 p.m. flight. The threat was clear. Just then a flushed, overweight man in a rumpled suit, reeking of stale whiskey, shoved his way to the front. He was already talking loudly on his phone. Yeah, I'm here. They better have my damn seat. This whole airline is a joke. He flashed a crumpled boarding pass at Carolyn. Chad Jennings, 1A. Carolyn's entire demeanor transformed. A bright, artificial smile bloomed on her face. Mr. Jennings, absolutely. We've been waiting for you. Right this way, sir. We have you all settled in 1A. Can I get you a drink voucher for the delay? About time. Jennings grunted and waddled past Matthew, bumping his shoulder without a word of apology. The world stopped for a second. It was so blatant, so utterly transparent. Matthew looked from the retreating back of Jennings to the smiling face of Carolyn. The smile vanished the instant she turned back to him. Now, sir, she said, are you going to board, or are you going to cause a problem? Because if you're going to cause a problem, I will have Port Authority police remove you from my gate. We don't tolerate disruptive passengers. The words hung in the air. Disruptive. Problem. Remove you. Matthew Thorne. The man who commanded a $90 billion technology empire was being threatened with arrest. He looked at her. Truly looked at her. He saw the petty power, the ingrained prejudice, the casual cruelty. He saw the system she represented. He could have made a call. He could have brought down the fury of his entire executive team on this one gate. He could have bought the airline on the spot and fired her before she finished her shift. But that was not his way. Instead, a profound, icy calm settled over him. He had been disrespected. More than that, his company had been. Because TAA was not just an airline he was flying. They were a client. A very, very bad client. Matthew slowly took the new flimsy boarding pass for 14B. He didn't break eye contact. I see, he said, his voice quiet, almost a whisper, but carrying the weight of a death sentence. Thank you for clarifying the situation, Carolyn. You've been most helpful. He turned and walked toward the jet bridge, a man relegated to the back. Carolyn Hayes watched him go, her expression one of smug triumph. She had put another problem in his place. She turned back to her screen, completely oblivious to the fact that she had just pulled the pin on a grenade that would incinerate her career and cripple the entire airline. The walk to seat 14B was a modern-day gauntlet of shame. First, Matthew had to walk through the hushed, spacious sanctuary of first class. The carpet was plusher here. The light was softer. The flight attendants, already cooing over their prized passengers, spoke in gentle, accommodating tones. And there in his seat, 1A, was Chad Jennings. He had already kicked off his shoes, revealing mismatched socks, and had his bare feet propped up on the bulkhead. He was loudly demanding a real drink, not this pre-flight champagne nonsense, from a young, nervous-looking flight attendant. He glanced up as Matthew passed, caught his eye, and gave a small, victorious smirk. He knew exactly what had happened. He was a man who had benefited from the system his entire life, and he relished it. Matthew continued passing through the smaller business-class cabin and into the curtained-off section of premium economy. 14B was a middle seat. The man in 14A, the window seat, was already asleep, his considerable bulk spilling over the armrest, his mouth open in a wet snore. The woman in 14C, the aisle, was frantically typing on a laptop, her elbows out elbows that would surely be jabbing him in the ribs for the entire 7-hour flight. Matthew, a man used to bespoke Italian suits and boardrooms that smelled of old money and new ideas, surveyed the cramped beige-colored seat. He slid in his knees instantly, jamming against the seat back in front of him. The air was stale. The humiliation was total. A junior flight attendant, Somi Jenkins, came by, checking seatbelts. She was young, early 20s, and still had a spark of genuine kindness in her eyes that hadn't yet been extinguished by corporate cynicism. She glanced at Matthew's boarding pass, then at his face, then back at the pass. She'd seen him walk through the first-class cabin. She could do the math. "Sir, 14B, she asked, her voice hesitant. Is this your assigned seat?" Matthew simply nodded. "It is now." "But I thought I saw you at the front," she whispered, leaning in. Did you want to move?" The gate agent, Carolyn, was very insistent, Matthew said, offering a small, sad smile. "She said this was a very nice seat." Somi's face flushed with a mixture of anger and embarrassment. "Oh," she said, her voice small. I'm so sorry, sir. That's not right. She shouldn't have. Let me see if there's anything I can do. Maybe I can move you to an aisle." "Thank you, Somi," Matthew interrupted, reading her name tag. "But that won't be necessary. I'll be fine right here. I appreciate your kindness." Somi hesitated, knowing an injustice had occurred, but powerless to fix it. "Okay. Well, please let me know if you need anything. Anything at all." She moved on her shoulders, slumped. The cabin doors closed with a pneumatic thump. The captain's voice came over the intercom, a generic, cheerful monotone, welcoming them aboard TAA Flight 108. The safety video began to play. Matthew Thorne sat in the semi-darkness. He felt the rumble of the engines starting. He watched the woman in 14C sigh heavily and slam her laptop shut. He felt the vibration as the plane began to push back from the gate. He pulled out his phone. He still had a few minutes of 4G connection before they were officially in the air. His face was illuminated by the screen's glow. He was no longer a humiliated passenger. He was the CEO of Astria Solutions. He wasn't angry. He was disappointed. And when Matthew Thorne was disappointed, stock markets trembled. He opened his secure messaging app. He had 2 threads. The first was to Amara K, COO. Amara was his legal counsel, his chief of operations, and his most trusted general. She was ruthless, brilliant, and understood his mind perfectly. His message was short, cryptic, and devastating. Amara, immediate action required. Execute Protocol Indigo on client Taeoi, full audit. Reference outstanding invoice 774B. They are in material breach of contract. Acknowledge. Amara's reply came back in 3 seconds. Acknowledged. Executing Indigo. Protocol Indigo was a term they had devised for exactly this. It wasn't just a threat. It was a kill switch. Invoice 774B was a $50 million licensing fee for the Astria Flight Core system. TAA was 92 days past due. Matthew had been letting it slide, given their public financial struggles as a gesture of goodwill while they renegotiated their credit. That goodwill was now evaporated. Full audit meant the system would immediately begin a compliance check. A check TAA with its overdue bill would instantly fail. The second text was to Ben G., CFO. Ben was the numbers man, the one who controlled the purse strings, not just of Astria, but of Meridian Capital Matthews Private Holding Company, which had ironically extended a $200 million revolving line of credit to TAA to keep them solvent. His message was even simpler. Ben called the TAA note, freeze the Meridian credit line, all of it. Effective 0900 EST. Ben's reply. Done. Are you sure that will trigger insolvency? Matthew typed his final reply as the plane turned onto the taxiway. I am in seat 14B. Yes, I am sure. He put his phone into airplane mode. He closed his eyes, settled back against the unforgiving seat, and took a deep, steadying breath. He had just set a time bomb. The timer was set for 30 minutes. The airline and everyone on this plane just didn't know it yet. 2,000 miles away, in a sleek glass and steel high-rise in Houston, Texas, Amara Hayes read her CEO's message. Her perfectly manicured fingers, which had been reviewing a contract, froze over her keyboard. Protocol Indigo. She whispered it, a flash of genuine shock on her face. In the 5 years since they had developed the protocol, it had never been used. It was their nuclear option, reserved for a client who had committed a breach so profound that it required a total immediate shutdown. She spun in her ergonomic chair to her master console. Computer open TAA file priority 1. A holographic display flickered to life, showing Transatlantic Air's client dashboard. A huge, flashing red banner at the top read, Account 92 days delinquent. Invoice 774B. $50,000. Amara had warned TAA's CFO about this. Her team had sent 3 dozen emails. They had been met with delays, excuses, and for the last 2 weeks, silence. Execute Protocol Indigo. Amara said, her voice firm. Confirm execution of Indigo compliance audit on client Transatlantic Air. The system's placid voice asked. This will revoke all active licenses under Clause 14A of the service agreement and will trigger immediate notification to all relevant aviation regulatory bodies, including the FAA and EASA. Confirm, Amara said. She placed her thumb on a biometric scanner. The screen flashed Audit Initiated. Across the globe on the servers that hosted TAA's Astria Flight Core system, a cascade of digital commands began. The software that managed TAA's entire operation, from the load balancing, calculations for cargo, to the engine wear and tear schedules, to the final safety checklists that allowed a plane to legally take off, had just been locked. Every TAA plane currently in the air was still safe. Astria's system was built never to endanger a flight in progress. But every TAA plane on the ground, it was now legally and logistically a multi-million-dollar paperweight. Simultaneously, in a stark white office in Manhattan, Ben Gideon, CFO, of Meridian Capital read his own text from Matthew. I am in seat 14B. Ben, a man who lived on spreadsheets, knew exactly what seat 1A on TAA 108 was. He also knew Matthew was supposed to be in it. He connected the dots instantly. Prejudice, disrespect. "Janine," he yelled to his assistant, "get me Don Fletcher at TAA on the line. Now, and get our legal team. I'm calling the TAA note." "Calling it," Janine stammered. "Sir, they'll default. They can't cover a $200 million call." "That," Ben said, his voice cold as ice, "is precisely the point." He opened his terminal and typed in the authorization codes. With a single Enter key, the $200 million line of credit that TAA used to pay for its daily fuel, its gate fees, and its payroll was frozen. The account was locked. Back on TAA Flight 108. 10 minutes later. The plane was third in line for takeoff. Matthew could see the rain-swept runway just ahead. The pilot, Captain Miller, was making his final checks. Suddenly, a loud, insistent beeping filled the cockpit. A red message flashed on their primary display, a display powered by Astria Solutions system non-compliant. License audit failure. Do not proceed to takeoff. FAA notified. Captain Miller stared at it. "What in the hell is that?" he said to his co-pilot. "I've never seen that screen." His radio crackled. "TAA 108, this is JFK Tower. Hold your position. We are showing you. Stand by. We are showing your entire airline as red flagged. Do not take off." Before Miller could even reply, his cabin operations panel lit up. A call from the purser. He picked it up. "What is it?" "Deb, Captain," the purser's panicked voice said. "Our systems are dead. Catering lists, passenger manifests, even the in-flight entertainment. It's all frozen on a blue screen with a logo, Astria Solutions." Captain Miller felt a jolt of pure fear. This wasn't a glitch. This was a system-wide assassination. His voice, when it came over the PA, was strained, trying and failing to sound calm. Folks, this is Captain Miller from the flight deck. We seem to be having a slight delay from operations. Some unexpected computer issue. We'll be on our way as soon as we get it sorted." In seat 14B, Matthew Thorne opened one eye. Slight delay, he thought. That's an optimistic way of putting it. TAA, Global Operations Center. Queens, NY. 15 minutes later. The Ops Center, usually a hub of calm, focused activity, was now a scene from a disaster movie. Every single screen on the massive World View board, which tracked their 300-plus aircraft, had turned from TAA blue to a sickening, flashing red. Fleet grounded. Licensing violation. Fleet grounded. "What is happening?" TAA's CEO, Don Fletcher, screamed as he stormed into the room. His face purple. "Get me Houston. Get me Astria Solutions on the phone, an analyst." A young man named Tim was shaking. "Sir, we're trying. All their lines are going to a pre-recorded message about a compliance audit. And sir, the bank." "What about the bank?" Fletcher roared. "Meridian Capital. They've frozen our credit line. They've called our note. Sir, we can't pay for fuel. We can't pay anyone. As of right now, we're insolvent." Don Fletcher, a man who prided himself on his bluster, stumbled back and grabbed a chair. Insolvent. Grounded. In 15 minutes, his entire airline had been erased. Who? He whispered, "Who did this to us?" Just then his personal assistant ran in holding a tablet. "Sir, an urgent call from Mr. Fields, the station manager at JFK. It's about Flight 108. He says he knows what this is about. A passenger. A man they moved from first class." Fletcher looked up, his eyes wide with disbelief. "A passenger. This is over a seat." "The passenger's name, sir. It's Matthew Thorne." The analyst Tim overheard. He frantically typed the name into his console, cross-referencing it with their vendor files. He went pale. He turned to his CEO. "Sir," Tim said, his voice barely audible. "Matthew Thorne. He isn't a passenger. He's the CEO of Astria Solutions. And, oh God, he's the sole owner of Meridian Capital." The ops center went dead silent. Don Fletcher's world, which had been collapsing, now imploded. "Where," Fletcher growled, his voice a terrifying monotone, "is Matthew Thorne right now?" Tim checked the manifest. "Sir, according to the gate agent's log, he's on Flight 108, in seat 14B. On the taxiway, Captain Miller's knuckles were white as he gripped his controls. The rain had started to lash against the cockpit windshield. His radio was a torrent of panicked voices from other TAA flights, all stuck at gates, all reporting the same Astria lockout. Then came the new direct order from the TAA Ops Center. It was not from a dispatcher. It was from the VP of Flight Operations himself. "TAA 108, this is Operations Command. Shut down your engines. You are to be towed back to Gate B23 immediately. I repeat, return to gate." "Return to gate," the co-pilot muttered. "We haven't even taken off. What is going on?" Captain Miller, a 30-year veteran, knew a corporate catastrophe when he saw one. He let out a long sigh. "Doesn't matter. You heard the man." He clicked the intercom. His voice was now devoid of any false cheer. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is the captain. I apologize. I've just received word that TAA is experiencing a system-wide operational issue. They are recalling our aircraft. We are returning to the gate. All transatlantic air flights worldwide are being grounded." The cabin exploded. It wasn't just groans this time. It was shouts. People pulled out their phones, desperate to find a signal to find out what was happening. In first class, Chad Jennings was on his feet, purple-faced, screaming at the junior flight attendant, Somi. "Grounded? What do you mean, grounded?" "This is unacceptable. I have $1 million meeting. I'll have your job for this." Somi Jenkins just stood there, pale and trembling, taking the abuse. In 14B, Matthew Thorne watched the unfolding chaos with a kind of clinical detachment. He felt the plane shudder as a tow tug attached to the nose gear, and began the slow, humiliating process of dragging them backward away from the runway, away from their destination. The journey back to Gate B23 took an excruciating 20 minutes. 20 minutes of passengers yelling into phones, crew members, trying to give answers they didn't have, and the man in 14A waking up and loudly complaining about the delay. This, Matthew thought, is the cost of a small-minded decision. He felt a pang of regret for the other passengers. They didn't deserve this. But he also knew with an iron certainty that if he had let this go, if he had simply accepted the humiliation, then the next person Carolyn Hayes decided she didn't like would suffer too. And the next. This wasn't revenge. It was a market correction. The plane finally docked with a hard clunk at Gate B23. It had been exactly 32 minutes since Matthew had been denied his seat. The fasten seatbelt sign pinged off, but before anyone could stand, the jet bridge door opened with a hiss. 2 men stormed onto the plane. The first was Mr. Erupted, Fields, the TAA station manager, a thin, frantic man whose suit was rumpled and whose face was slick with sweat. He was holding a tablet computer like a shield. The second person trailing behind him was Carolyn Hayes. If she had looked pale before, she now looked translucent, as if she'd seen a ghost. Her smugness was gone, replaced by a raw, primal terror. Her eyes were red-rimmed and darting frantically, scanning the cabin looking for something. "Ladies and gentlemen," Mr. Fields announced, his voice cracking, "please remain in your seats. We have a passenger manifest issue. We are looking for a Mr. Thorne. Mr. Matthew Thorne." Every head in the cabin turned. Who was Matthew Thorne? In first class, Chad Jennings paused his tirade. "Thorne? Who the hell is that?" Mr. Fields and Carolyn rushed past. First class passed business and burst through the curtain into premium economy. Fields was holding his tablet up, and on the screen was a publicly available file photo of Matthew Thorne accepting an aviation technology award. Fields's eyes scanned the rows. 12, 13, 14. He saw him, in the middle seat, knees bunched up, looking up at him with a perfectly calm, neutral expression. Mr. Fields froze. He looked from the picture on his tablet, the powerful CEO, on a stage, to the man crammed into 14B. They were the same. Mr. Thorne," Fields stammered, his voice dropping to a horrified whisper. Matthew Thorne." The entire cabin was now dead silent. You could hear the rain on the fuselage. Matthew Thorne slowly, deliberately unbuckled his seatbelt. He nodded once. "Yes, sir," Fields said, practically bowing. "Oh my God, sir. Please, you must come with me. There has been a catastrophic mistake. A terrible, terrible misunderstanding." He was blocking the aisle, so Matthew had to wait for the woman in 14C to clumsily gather her laptop so he could get out. As he stood up, he smoothed the front of his polo. He was by a foot the tallest man in the cabin. He had an aura of authority that no seat assignment could diminish, and it was now returning with a vengeance. He stood in the aisle. He looked at Mr. Fields. Then his gaze shifted, landing like a physical blow on Carolyn Hayes, who was cowering behind her boss. She let out a small, choked sound. She finally understood. She was staring at the man who had just grounded the airline. Matthew did not rush. He walked slowly, purposefully up the aisle. The entire plane watched him. Every passenger, every crew member was frozen in a state of collective, baffled silence. They were all trying to solve the equation. How did this man, this calm, well-dressed black man from a middle seat, have the power to stop the entire airline? He passed Chad Jennings in 1A. Jennings was standing in the aisle, his mouth agape, his face a confused shade of puce. "What's going on?" Jennings demanded of no one in particular. "Who is this guy? Why is he holding up the flight?" Matthew didn't even look at him. Jennings was a symptom. The disease was standing at the aircraft door. He reached the front galley. Mr. Fields was practically vibrating with anxiety. "Sir, please right this way. We have CEO Fletcher on a secure line for you in the lounge. He wants to apologize personally. We can fix this. Whatever it is, we can fix it." Matthew stopped. He didn't step onto the jet bridge. He turned slowly to face Carolyn Hayes. She was pressed against the bulkhead, trying to make herself small. She was openly weeping now, not tears of remorse, but tears of pure, unadulterated fear. Her career was flashing before her eyes. Matthew held up the flimsy creased boarding pass for 14B. He held it between his thumb and forefinger, as if it were a piece of garbage. "Carolyn, was it?" he asked. His voice was not loud. It was soft, precise, and carried to every corner of the silent cabin. She couldn't speak. She just nodded a convulsive, sobbing jerk of her head. "You said, 'A system error,'" Matthew continued, his voice dangerously smooth. "It seems you were absolutely right. Your entire airline appears to be having a system error. A very, very big one." He let the words hang in the air. He let her and everyone else connect the dots. I didn't know," she whispered the most pathetic of all excuses. "You didn't know what, Carolyn?" Matthew asked, taking a step closer. Mr. Fields flinched, but Matthew's posture was non-threatening. His words were the only weapon he needed. "Did you not know that my ticket for 1A was confirmed and paid for? Or did you not know that I was the CEO of the company that owns the software you're using to scan that very ticket? The software that, as of 35 minutes ago, has flagged Transatlantic Air as non-compliant with FAA and EASA. Safety protocols due to material breach of contract." Carolyn's knees buckled. She slid down the bulkhead slightly. "Or," Matthew pressed on, "did you just look at me in my casual clothes and decide I wasn't first-class material? Did you decide that Mr. Jennings," he gestured dismissively toward the gawking passenger, "was a better fit? You threatened to have me removed by security for causing a problem. It appears you are the one who has caused the problem, Carolyn." "Mr. Thorne, please," Fields begged, tugging at his arm. "The lounge. Mr. Fletcher is waiting. We can—" Matthew ignored him. He looked back at Carolyn. "You did this, not me. You with your small, ugly, prejudiced decision. You are the system error. You are the reason 300 passengers on this plane are going to be hours late. You are the reason 50,000 TAA passengers around the world are stranded. You." He dropped the 14B boarding pass at her feet. I have a family," she whimpered. "So does everyone on this plane," Matthew replied, his voice flat, devoid of all sympathy. "You should have thought of that before you decided to play God with Gate B23. He turned away from her, his dismissal absolute. He looked at Mr. Fields. "Now," he said, his voice shifting back to that of a CEO. "You can take me to Mr. Fletcher. We have terms to discuss. And believe me, they are not negotiations." He stepped off the plane and into the jet bridge, leaving a stunned silence and the sound of Carolyn Hayes's broken sobs behind him. The junior flight attendant, Somi Jenkins, watched him go, her hand over her mouth, a look of profound, terrified awe on her face. She had just seen a god move among mortals. The TAA first-class flagship lounge, usually a serene oasis of complimentary champagne and soft jazz, was a war room. The blinds were drawn. Every television was off. The only occupants were a handful of terrified-looking TAA executives and Matthew Thorne. Matthew sat in a leather wingback chair, sipping a bottle of sparkling water. He had declined the champagne. He was at work. On a massive 80-inch television screen, the face of TAA's CEO, Don Fletcher, glared at him. Fletcher, a man used to getting his way through bluster and intimidation, was clearly struggling to control his rage. "Thorne, this is blackmail," Fletcher sputtered. "It's corporate sabotage. You can't just, ground an airline. The FAA will have your head. I'll have you in court by noon." Matthew let him finish. He took a slow, deliberate sip of his water. "Don," Matthew said, his voice calm, "let's be very clear about our respective positions. Shall we?" He set the bottle down. "Position 1. Your company is 92 days delinquent on a $50 million invoice for safety-critical software. That is a material breach of our contract, which, as your lawyers know, gives Astria Solutions the full legal right to suspend your license and conduct a compliance audit. The audit which you failed has automatically notified the FAA. I didn't ground you. Your own negligence and failure to pay your bills grounded you. I am in fact protecting the flying public from a carrier who can't afford to maintain its safety systems." Fletcher's face went white. He knew this was legally true. "Position 2, Matthew continued. My other company, Meridian Capital, extended you a $200 million revolving line of credit out of good faith. A credit line you have used to its absolute limit. A credit line which, per our agreement, can be called at any time for any reason with 1 hour's notice. Ben Gideon gave you that notice 45 minutes ago. As of right now, Transatlantic Air is financially insolvent. You can't pay your fuelers. You can't pay your gate crews. You can't even pay for the plastic cups your flight attendants are using." He leaned forward. "You are not in a position to threaten me, Don. You are in a position to beg. So I suggest you change your tone." The silence in the room was absolute. Fletcher stared at the camera, his jowls quivering. He was a king in his castle, and Matthew had just informed him the castle was built on sand, and the tide was in. What do you want?" Fletcher finally whispered, the fight gone from his voice. "It's not what I want, Don. It's what is required to restore my confidence in TAA as a business partner," Matthew said, "and it's quite simple. 2 things. First, the money. You will wire the outstanding $50 million to Astria Solutions immediately. You will also wire a $15 million reactivation and late penalty fee. Not by end of day. Not from accounting. You will do it from your emergency reserve. Now, while I am on this call, I want my CFO to confirm receipt of $65 million before we continue this conversation." Fletcher nodded, his eyes dead. Okay. I'll have it done." He began typing furiously off-screen. "Second," Matthew said, his voice hardening. "This is about your corporate culture. The incident this morning was not a glitch. It was a feature. Your employee, Ms. Carolyn Hayes, felt empowered to treat a customer, a first-class passenger, with prejudice, disdain, and threats. She is a liability. She is the embodiment of your broken service." "She's fired," Fletcher said instantly. "Consider her gone. I'll have her security pass revoked before you finish your sentence." "That is a good start," Matthew said, "but it's not enough. Firing her is easy. It makes her a scapegoat. I want you to feel this. I want a public statement. From you personally. You will announce that TAA is partnering with an external firm to conduct a root and branch audit of all diversity inclusion and customer-facing bias training. You will personally oversee this new initiative." Fletcher looked confused. "An external firm? Who?" "Mine," Matthew said. "I'm sending in an audit team from Astria's consulting wing. They specialize in corporate culture correction. They will be expensive. and you will give them unrestricted access to every employee from your baggage handlers to your executive board. This is not negotiable." This was the final twist of the knife. Not only was Fletcher paying a massive fine, he was now paying Matthew's own company to come in and tear his corporate culture apart from the inside. It was a total unconditional surrender. A full minute passed. Fletcher was breathing heavily. "You've won, Thorne," he finally said, his voice ragged. "You've won. The money is being sent. Make the statement. Just, for God's sake, turn my airline back on. You're costing me $10 million a minute." Matthew sat back. He pulled out his phone. He saw a text from Ben Funds received. 65 Elmholes. He looked up at the screen. "Amara Hayes, my COO, will begin a phased reactivation of your licenses, starting with the grounded overseas flights. Your domestic fleet will come online gate by gate." He stood up. "Don, it's been a pleasure doing business with you." He disconnected the call, leaving Don Fletcher to stare at a blank screen, a man who had just lost his airline to a passenger in seat 14B. The terminal at gate B23 was no longer a place of travel. It was the epicenter of a corporate earthquake. The news, which had first been a whisper among the crew, was now a global siren. On the muted lounge televisions, every major financial network had the same breaking news ticker. Transatlantic Air, TAA, halts all global operations. Stock in freefall, down 60%. Speculation of catastrophic system failure or insolvency. Mr. Fields, the station manager who had escorted Matthew to the lounge, was standing stiffly in the corner, his face the color of ash. He was watching the stock ticker on his phone, his thumb refreshing the screen with a convulsive twitch. With every refresh, he seemed to shrink, as if each lost dollar was being siphoned directly from his own body. He was witnessing the real-time evaporation of his pension, his 401k, and his entire 30-year career. The chaos wasn't confined to the stock market. It was visceral. It was human. Beyond the frosted glass doors of the lounge, the main concourse had descended into a pandemonium that was part refugee camp, part riot. Thousands of passengers, their travel plans pulverized, were swarming TAA counters, their faces a mask of rage and confusion. The digital display boards, which should have shown a rhythmic pulse of departures, were now a solid static block of red. Cancelled. 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 Even the TAA staff were victims. A pilot stranded with his crew was trying to use his corporate card to buy a bottle of water. The transaction was declined. A gate agent at B25, a gate over, burst into tears as her digital manifest system simply vanished, replaced by the blue Astria Solutions compliance error. The ripple had become a tidal wave, drowning the guilty and the innocent alike. This was the true cost of the system error that had begun with a single spiteful decision. When Matthew Thorne stood up, the remaining TAA executives in the lounge flinched. He was to them not a man, but the personification of a hostile act of God. He adjusted the drape of his knit polo, a simple human gesture that seemed terrifyingly calm in the eye of the hurricane he had created. "Mr. Fields," Matthew said, his voice cutting through the tension, "I am ready to board." "Yes. Yes, of course, Mr. Thorne," Fields stammered, pocketing his phone. We have Flight 108 waiting for you, a new crew. The original crew was compromised. We're ready for you." The walk back to gate B23 was a parting of the Red Sea. TAA employees, alerted by frantic messages from fields, saw him coming. They didn't stare, but they felt his presence. They cleared his path, their eyes downcast, their whispers ceasing as he passed, only to erupt again in his wake. He was the man from 14B. He was the man who held the switch. He reached the gate, and there she was. Carolyn Hayes was no longer a gate agent. She was a woman undone. She was standing by a structural pillar, a stark white column that seemed to be the only thing holding her upright. Her severe blonde bob was disheveled. Her face was hollow, her eyes red-rimmed and vacant, staring at a fixed point on the industrial carpet. The smugness, the power, the casual cruelty, all of it had been burned away, leaving only this empty, brittle shell. 2 Port Authority officers stood nearby, their presence official and non-negotiable. Another TAA manager, one Matthew didn't recognize, was speaking to her in low, firm tones. As Matthew approached the manager, took Carolyn's TAA identification badge, which was on a lanyard around her neck, and with a pragmatic snip from a pair of cutters severed it. The sound was as final as a guillotine. She was holding a small brown cardboard box containing a framed photo of a doll, a coffee mug, and a half-eaten bag of almonds. Her career reduced to the contents of a junk drawer. She looked up as Matthew stopped a few feet away. Her eyes blank for a moment, focused on him. Recognition flickered, then a spasm of pure, undiluted anguish. This was not the remorse of a person who had done wrong. It was the agony of a person who had been caught. "Mr. Thorne," she whispered the name, a pained exhale. She took a step forward, her hand half reaching the box, trembling. "Please, I have a mortgage. My son." Matthew did not respond. He simply looked at her. His face was not angry. It was not triumphant. It was the face of a mathematician looking at an equation that had finally and correctly been solved. He gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. Not of forgiveness, but of acknowledgement. He had seen her. The system had seen her. And the correction was now complete. That simple, silent nod was more devastating than any shout. It confirmed that her fate was sealed, her plea irrelevant. She was a line item in a balance sheet that had been reconciled. Her shoulders slumped. The last spark of hope died. She turned, took her box, and let the officers escort her toward a staff exit. Matthew turned to the jet bridge. A new, crisp and visibly terrified gate agent scanned his new boarding pass. "Welcome, Mr. Thorne. Please enjoy your flight." He stepped onto the plane. The atmosphere was sterile. The new flight crew, a senior purser, and 2 attendants, clearly the airline's A-team, snapped to attention. "Mr. Thorne," the purser said, his smile tight. "A pleasure to have you. I am Julian. Please write to your seat. 1A. Can I get you a bottle of Blanton's, or perhaps a pre-departure glass of Dom Perignon? 08. It's on us. Of course. Everything is on us." "Just some sparkling water, Julian. Thank you." Matthew said, his calmness only making them more nervous. He settled into the plush, spacious throne of seat 1A. The legroom was infinite. The beige-colored plastic of 14B was a distant tactile memory. He was precisely where he was supposed to be. He had just buckled his seatbelt when the commotion began. "What do you mean my ticket is invalid? This is an outrage!" Chad Jennings, the usurper of 1A, was standing in the galley, his face a blotchy, furious purple. He had clearly been refusing to move, believing his earlier victory at the gate made him invincible. Now the new steely-eyed gate agent was on board, flanked by the two Port Authority officers who had just dealt with Carolyn. "Sir, I will not ask you again," the agent said, his voice cold and devoid of any customer service platitude. "Your name is Chad Jennings. Your Platinum Elite status was revoked 3 months ago when your corporate account, Jennings Development, was suspended for non-payment." "That's a lie! It's a system glitch!" Jennings roared. "It is not, sir," the agent said, holding up a tablet. "The ticket you used was a buddy pass from a terminated employee. It is fraudulent. Ms. Hayes, in her haste, failed to verify it. She should have had you arrested at the gate. We are correcting that oversight now." The blood drained from Jennings's face. His entire identity, the Platinum Elite Bluster the $1 Million Meeting, was a house of cards. He was a fraud. Carolyn, in her prejudiced rush to reward the man she thought belonged, had embraced a con artist and ejected a billionaire. It was the perfect, bitter irony. This is ridiculous. This guy. Jennings pointed a shaking finger at Matthew. "He did this. This is his fault. He grounded the plane. Arrest him." The officers stepped forward. "Sir, you need to come with us. You are being removed from this aircraft for travel fraud and causing a disturbance." "No, I'm not moving." Jennings braced himself in the aisle. The officers didn't hesitate. One grabbed his left arm, the other his right, and they physically hauled him from his stance. His pathetic, sputtering panic filled the cabin as they dragged him half-tripping down the jet bridge. "This is not over. You'll hear from my lawyers. You'll all hear." Matthew watched the entire sordid affair with a clinical detachment. He hadn't lifted a finger. He hadn't had to. Once he had removed the true system error, Carolyn's prejudice, the system had simply begun to heal itself naturally and violently, expelling the other infections. The cabin door was finally sealed. A profound, almost holy silence descended. The junior flight attendant, Somi Jenkins, the only crew member held over from the original flight, approached his seat. Her hands were visibly shaking as she held a tray with a crystal glass and a bottle of San Pellegrino. Mr. Thorne," she stammered, pouring the water. "Somi," Matthew said, his voice gentle, making her look up. "It's all right. The storm has passed." Tears immediately welled in her eyes. "Sir, I'm so sorry. About before. I keep thinking about it. I'm part of this company. I feel ashamed. I knew what she was doing was wrong, and I offered you an aisle seat. It was so small." Matthew looked at her, his gaze kind. In a system designed to be small, Somi, any act of kindness is large. You were the only person from the gate to this cabin who saw a person, not a problem. Transatlantic Air has forgotten how to do that. And that is what I intend to fix. She blinked, confused. "Fix, sir?" He reached into his jacket and pulled out a simple, impossibly heavy stock business card. "My audit team is coming into TAA. They're going to rebuild their customer-facing and bias training protocols from the ground up. But they're software engineers and management consultants. They don't know what it's like in this cabin. They don't know what you know." He held out the card. "I'm creating an independent oversight board, a small group of TAA employees who will report directly to my team and to me. It won't be run by VPs. It will be run by people who still know what service and human decency mean. I want you to be the first person on it." Somi stared at the card. Matthew Thorne, CEO, Astria Solutions. Sir, I'm only 24. I've only been flying for 2 years. I'm nobody. You were somebody today, Matthew said, placing the card in her hand. I don't care about your seniority. I care about your character. Character is what was missing at gate B23. That's all I'm interested in. My Chief of Staff's direct line is on that card. Call her when we land in London. Somi Jenkins closed her hand around the card, a single tear rolling down her cheek. It was a golden ticket, not to a chocolate factory, but to a future she couldn't have imagined, one built not on aha moment, but on a single decent impulse. The engines finally mercifully spooled up. The plane pushed back from the gate, leaving the terminal and its chaos behind. As the massive aircraft rocketed down the runway and lifted into the rainy sky, Matthew Thorne watched the lights of New York recede. He thought about the cost, the thousands of passengers stranded, the careers vaporized. He was not a vengeful man, but he knew that a tumor cannot be wished away. It must be cut out. Carolyn was not the disease. She was a symptom. The cancer was the corporate culture of arrogance and apathy that started with Don Fletcher and trickled down to every gate. Today, he hadn't just grounded an airline. He had performed emergency radical surgery. He had exposed a fraud, ended a toxic career, and elevated a decent one. He had corrected the system error in the only language the system understood, power and money. He looked out the window at the dark clouds now far below them. The balance sheet had been restored. The karma had been paid in full. Matthew Thorne closed his eyes, and for the first time that day, he rested. In the end, Matthew Thorne got his seat. But the cost for transatlantic air was catastrophic: $65 million. In immediate fines, a $200 million credit line evaporated their stock in freefall and their reputation in tatters. Carolyn Hayes lost her job, not just because she was rude, but because her prejudice exposed the deep systemic rot in her company. Chad Jennings, the man who took the seat, was revealed to be a fraud, arrested for his own arrogance. And Somi Jenkins, the one person who showed a moment of simple human kindness, was given an opportunity to help rebuild the entire airline. This story is a powerful reminder that our actions, especially our small acts of prejudice and cruelty, have consequences. We never truly know who we are talking to. We never know the power that lies hidden behind a simple knit polo. The world is run by people you don't recognize. So what did you think of this story of hard karma? Who do you think was most in the wrong? If you loved this story of justice and karma, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more incredible real-life dramas. Don't forget to ring the bell so you never miss an upload. And share this video with someone who needs to see that karma sometimes works faster than we think. We read all your comments, so let us know your thoughts below. Until next time, stay aware.